Welcome to the first Code to Cloud podcast from the new Managed Cloud Services team at Americaneagle.com. I'm Tom McDonald, part of the product team for that new division, which is Americaneagle Managed Cloud Services. Now, Americaneagle.com is one of the nation's first and most experienced web and digital infrastructure firms. They built some of the first commercial websites on the internet and some of the busiest, from whitehouse.gov to NFL sites that are handling the usual Sunday blitz and even Super Bowl traffic. They've also built real-time transit payment systems that serve thousands of riders each day and some of the most advanced e-commerce sites operating today. So how does this qualify them to manage the increasingly complex hybrid and multi-cloud environments businesses are adopting? I kind of asked myself the same question before I joined, and what I learned is the answer is quite a lot. And our guests today are the folks who can detail that for us. CEO Tony Svanascini has been here since the beginning. Chief Technology Officer Ryan McElrath has been here for 30 years. And Paul Kocan, our Vice President of Managed Services, has been in and around the business for nearly 2 decades. Gentlemen, welcome. And first, congratulations, AEMCS is officially off the ground.
Thanks.
We got our new logo, we got our new website. Paul's sporting one of those new shirts over there. But what isn't new is what you guys are doing in that division, which is what you've been doing for the last 30 years, right?
Exactly.
So before we get into the details there, I want to read some stats about the adoption of multi-cloud. I mentioned that off the top. So right now, 89% of enterprises are using multi-cloud environments with an average of 3 to 4 clouds per business. Yet 66% of those companies and 80% of those enterprises report that it's a lack of skills managing those environments are impacting the business. Now, Tony, this business spun up with the idea that you can solve that problem.
Right.
And you did it without hiring a bunch of rocket scientists or buying data centers, right?
Right. We already had the rocket scientists, basically, just really good programmers and DevOps and, people that understand how to monitor servers and configure them and monitor everything and all the things that come with that, which we'll get into later. And we also own our own data centers. So we have that expertise really since the mid-90s when we started doing things.
Yeah. So let's start there. Talk about that evolution from a business standpoint, going from web and digital infrastructure, essentially in a single building, to what you're doing now, which is cutting edge managed services, managing complex environments.
Yeah, we basically got into the web business very early on, really back in 1995, 1996, when the internet first really came out. And I grew up with BBSs, which stands for bulletin board systems back in the day. So if anybody remembers the movie War Games with Matthew Broderick, when he would dial into different computers and download software or break into defense departments, I didn't do that. But basically that's how you communicated before. So everything was just one-to-one. And then when the internet came out, obviously it connected the whole world. And I could see right away this was going to be unbelievable. I couldn't imagine e-commerce and all that, but I definitely could see that it was going to change everything. So we started doing website development right off the bat, really. One of our first customers, our first big customer was the Big Ten conference for all the athletics and everything else. And I think we got really lucky with that because that was a site that would get a lot of traffic automatically because people are already seeking that out. It's not like you're creating a new idea or anything. They know what the Big Ten is. They want to get the scores, the stats, especially for the sports that aren't as popular, but they don't get the newspapers at the time. So that was our first opportunity. So we had to host it. We didn't know any better. There really weren't a lot of hosting companies. So we created the own infrastructure ourselves. Back then it was 3 or 4 PCs, and I don't even think we had development servers back then. We just did it all on the actual production.
We have pictures of those.
Yeah. So it was just the server. But we ran a T1 line into our building downtown. We basically, created our own little data center within there, battery backup. And at the beginning, we didn't even have a firewall. So we learned about all that stuff afterwards. There weren't as many people hacking things back then either. But we just kept, building that business and started selling more people websites. And then we got into e-commerce, and that created a whole other litany of issues that we had to be careful with, and how to take credit cards, how to do it securely. We did get a firewall. Then we started understanding about bigger traffic, and then security became a bigger issue. We understood how to prevent attacks like DDoS attacks. That was probably the first one that we really had that we learned about that through the School of Hard Knocks on how to deal with it and everything. But there's so much. And then obviously the White House was a huge project.
Sure.
That ended up being the biggest launch in the history of the internet. Preceded by that were NFL teams that we did.
Yeah, right.
That really put us at another level with understanding how to deal with not just traffic, but people that tried to break the sites, people that would, post horrible things on message boards and get around the security. And so it really made us better. So
Yeah. So those skills kind of grew up into what you're doing in the managed cloud services business.
Absolutely.
Now, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, if you fast forward through, through the 2000s and then the 2010s, and then in 2020, there's so much that grew during that stage in the internet. We really stayed on top of it the whole way through. And, basically when the cloud started getting more popular with both Azure and then AWS and all that, nothing really changed from the security standpoint, from all the know-how we learned over those years in terms of, really how to run it, how to load balance it. And I'll let Ryan and Paul talk a lot more about this, but the only thing that really changed was just the bare metal. I mean, the cloud is still bare metal too, but it's somewhere else you don't really see
and
it.
all those CMS systems that you manage now are now in the cloud.
Exactly. But basically it's just another data center. So managing all that and understanding the cost behind that and what you really need and, how to deal with all the, the same application monitoring, the same firewall protection, the same load balancing, that's still needed. And because there's so much more of it now, there's a need for people that really understand, what they're doing to be out there. And that's where we help.
So that's a unique experience. As I understand, there's a lot of tenure in the team there, right? How that has all that experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's how many people, have over 10 years. It's probably 10.
Yeah.
I mean, just going off the
And
top
those are
of
all
my
the
head.
senior members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So Ryan, Tony talked through the evolution of the business. Can you talk about the evolution of the skill sets and the team and some of the adversity you faced that eventually gave you the chops to say, yeah, we can manage these complex environments that are arising today in business?
Yeah, I mean, and we started with the development, so we were building and hosting all of these. So we were really a one-stop shop. So we really had to understand every part of it from the ground up, from the programming and the infrastructure. So yeah, some huge CMS, content management systems for high-profile customers, high-volume e-commerce sites, custom applications, high-volume transactional, custom, like for the transit systems, for all the rides coming in, and we collected all those. And the security part of it too. I mean, just like we were one of the first 10 data centers in 2007 to achieve PCI compliance. So that was like where Tony was talking about that combination of the high traffic for the NFL teams, but then you had the e-commerce. So that set us up perfectly when we got the opportunity to do the White House website because we had to do both.
Right.
And so we were an interesting part. I mean, we were able to build that and also manage and host it. So, and then, a lot of our partners started building software that's just native to the cloud. So we'd always hosted that on premise, the stuff we build and through the software, but then we had to do, like Tony said, the same thing in the cloud. So automated deployments, the security of it, the backups, the redundancy, the failover, all of that applied. And we got really good at that too. And we started doing it in the cloud as well. So
you pioneered, I would imagine, a lot of the processes as those components moved out from your data center into the cloud.
Yeah, a lot of things we figured out we did on our own, then the cloud had tools that then we were able to leverage that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So we're building this business around the idea of being application centric, full stack expertise,
Right.
but application centric. How would you define application centric management?
Yeah. So it's taken the understand the business, understand how that business is reflected in the critical applications that business relies on, and then tuning and choosing often or tuning the stack that goes underneath it to best support that application. So when you have that mentality and you have the wide range of skill sets that we had, that you guys were talking about earlier with our kind of the different people we have and we can bring to bear and experience across all the different clouds and platforms, we can steer those applications to the right stack that works best for for that business and that application for the right price point with the right security, et cetera. So again, one cloud might be better if you need to be like FedRAMP compliant. Another one might be better if it's just it's a cost play and you just need to be efficient. We can help make those decisions and tune it to meet the business needs.
Right. So that's what's driving. We should have kind of set this up front. Driving this hybrid and multi-cloud migration is that each of these cloud providers do something very well.
Right.
Databases, compute and storage, analytics, AI. Some have global footprints that, again, can put you milliseconds away from billions of people, right? And so being application centric is what then? Being able to
take all those different cloud services, platforms that end up getting wired together, making one application suite for a business, and be able to monitor them, support them, tune them, all with one point of accountability, one visibility, one unified approach.
Tony, talk about that team and hiring here at Americaneagle.com. What kind of people do you look for, or do you have on staff that you're able to retain them? And what do you look for people to have the mental acuity to manage these types of environments?
Yeah, and I think Ryan should definitely chime in with us also, and probably Paul, but it's really a combination of, the resume shows a lot. I mean, if they show they had an interest in computer science and, computers in general, for this type of role, it's really more about hacker's a bad word because you don't want to, hacker as a negative connotation too, but it's really that type of person that's, just into computers like crazy. They enjoy it. They love it. They're not just doing it as a job. It's something that they always really liked. And then, they might have gone to school to, just to hone in on it more and to understand it better and everything else. But it's really people that have a passion for it. So,
Yeah.
And then you've got different subsets within there. You've got some people that really like to focus on security. We've got a few of those. You've got people that really like to focus on, all the different hard drive arrays.
It's a constant
storage
learning
systems and things like
experience,
that.
right?
It's a constant learning experience, and it's really about, keeping up with the market. I mean, the interesting thing about the market with this stuff is that because the same people that are designing a lot of times are also in the field, and it's a very expert system type of industry, it moves a lot faster because of that, because the adoption happens much more quickly than, if you're making like a product for, a new plastic bottle or whatever, you've got to go through a lot of things where, the machinery finally accepts it, and the guys that are making the machinery they agree that's a new way to make it and everything else. With everything in IT, it basically just gets deployed, once somebody comes up with a new invention. So because of that, you've got people that are always looking at the latest and greatest. So if Cisco's coming out with a new product, or, any of the router companies or any of the firewall companies and things like that, they're into all that. They're reading all the Reddit sites, they're reading all the, all the industry mags, all the industry blogs and everything. And
So they want to keep learning.
yeah,
That makes
they're
sense.
fanatics with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like car guys, but on a much bigger level.
Yeah,
just
that
where
makes sense.
where the changes happen so fast. and
Yeah.
everything.
So Ryan, Tony talked about the team building aspect. Can you talk about the skills in managing these complex web and e-commerce sites, how that translates into managing multi-cloud and hybrid cloud? Not only the technical chops, but kind of the sense of urgency and diligence that's required.
Yeah, I mean, these higher level applications, you have to start looking at them a totally different way. So it's like if you're hosting sites that are in the Super Bowl or on Oprah Winfrey's biggest show of the year or the Today Show, you got to look at them differently. You got to really get into understand the customer's business and how they're going to advertise and some of the different things they're going to do on that site. You start looking for single points of failure. If this goes down, will everything go down? And how do we cover that with redundancy? You look, obviously load testing is a huge thing because they just don't get that traffic normally, but you got to see what part's going to fail. And, a lot of times people think for these big events that you just scale up a bunch of servers, throw a bunch of servers, infrastructure at it. And that can be part of it. They usually do that. But the thing people don't think of is that can be one single database query or a call to like a third party partner or some service, that everything can fail because of that. And like that's like where our expertise with the applications and the monitoring is, that we really have a good understanding of like putting together those tools and those monitors where we can quickly sniff that out and see where that's failing and like build around that, and so you don't run into those situations.
But you also mentioned knowing that Oprah's doing her favorite things show. Sounds like you got to have a good sense of the business as well to understand how these environments and when they're going to, hit a peak. Got to know the business as well as the technology. Is that right?
Even with the NFL draft, we knew that, anytime they were going to make a pick or something, or if they're going to make a trade, we let the client know, hey, at least give us a heads up that it's going to happen so we can have everything ready for you and, to burst and everything else. And today with a cloud, that's a little bit different. I'll do it automatically, but there's also ways to set up so you don't get a much bigger bill than you may have had to have gotten. So
Yeah.
And we learn how to leverage like CDNs and the content distribution networks like Akamai and Cloudflare, and you can really tune the caching very well. So like 99% of it's covered by those networks, and very little comes back to our data center. So that's a big way that you survive these spikes as well and get by. So.
And I think that's really what makes us better as a company, and that's where the managed services is something that we're really good at, is that we understand how these sites got to where they're at. We understand how they work because we build so many of them. A lot of companies that do this stuff, they don't have that experience. So they can still learn a lot about how to manage them and how to monitor them and things like that, but not like we can.
Yeah.
So that's where we were always unique in the business from the standpoint where we actually understood the hosting and the data center aspect of it, as well as the building of the sites. We really don't know of any other company that had that.
Right.
So it was a unique thing, and that's where this was born.
Paul, can you drill down on what Tony said a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I could just give like by way of example. We have a more than one customer. One it's reminding me of, that in the cloud you can auto scale and it can respond to traffic. That's great, but that doesn't always work. And we know we have all these patterns and ways of dealing with it. So one of our customers, they have big spikes right in the morning, right? And their team, before we took them over, would try to deal with that by increasing just like Ryan was saying, throw a bunch of CPU at it, throw a bunch of memory at it, use really big compute. They tried to scale out, but it kind of didn't work. It was too expensive. So we came in there, we understood their business patterns, right? And then we worked with them to make actually very small compute, right? And then in the morning before the spike, we put schedules to scale it out beforehand because the auto scaling couldn't respond fast enough. So we know the business patterns. We scale out in the morning. They totally takes on the load. There were some problems they have in their code too that we helped them fix. But then after the spike happens, it collapses back down. They end up solving all their, we ended up solving all their availability problems, as well as saving them a bunch of money. It's just a smarter way of doing it.
Let's talk about the money aspect of that, because you mentioned it was getting expensive.
Yeah.
More times than not, the ability to control costs are where you were doing the work, which is not at the infrastructure layer, but it was at the software layer, at the application layer. Can you talk about that, why that is the case?
You have to be able to get visibility into the software and the application. So, when we develop apps, we tend to have like a site reliability mindset where we're very effective and efficient at designing things to scale and be cost effective. But we don't only support applications that we write. Other people write applications and there's issues in there and they manifest themselves and they're band-aided by adding a bunch of compute and storage and memory. And we have since we're kind of an application centric first company, that our whole business is about applications first, and everything else we do kind of supports that, because the applications are what make people money and serve the need. We're able to, we've gotten skills in all sorts of different tooling. For example, application performance monitors, looking at logs, pulling in the right developers to help us take a look at code when we're seeing things that the customer couldn't find. And then we were able to point out issues. For example, we've had issues where, again, adding a bunch of compute and storage in memory to deal with an issue of an archive job that's going off in the middle of the day that no one even knew was there and was failing. It was going on so long, it would crash the system. They didn't know what their issue was. So they just kept trying to put Band-Aids on
Yeah.
it. We find the issue. We give them advice on where to make the code changes. They fix it, and then we're able to shrink the whole environment. And it saves them a bunch of money. And it was a simple coaching that it was just invisible to them because they didn't know it was happening.
Yeah, Tony mentioned monitoring before. How important is that?
Monitoring is, the good operational discipline, and monitoring is one aspect of that. And that's one of the things that we bring to bear. There's a lot of clever people out there that can build amazing things, but there's also like the discipline and the set of practices when you're dealing with, when you have to support customers like the White House and like transit systems. You have to you have to have a sense of urgency. You have to understand what makes an environment safe, secure, available. And so monitoring tools at every level. So, external monitors that act like a user login, synthetic monitoring, performance monitoring response time, and then inside the application, looking at calls and knowing patterns that need to be attended to, and having those alerted out. You have to look at the application. It's called observability. You have to observe it from all angles, and then you have to know how to respond by understanding the applications and understanding the experts and being able to react fast. And then, of course, the most important thing is preventing issues before they ever happen.
So Ryan, why is that so challenging for businesses to do themselves? That monitoring, that observability.
I just don't think they've seen as much stuff as we've seen, and
It's
all
experience.
the different ways something can fail. I think that's because Paul was talking about getting in the application. A lot of sites, if they're getting orders at a certain frequency, we know if they haven't had a new order come into the database in like a minute or 2 minutes, something's wrong. And you can do different thresholds at 3 a.m. as opposed to 8 a.m. But you're just really, as you get to know the application more, you just get more in tune with all these specific monitors that you put in place.
So Tony, what's your message to businesses that are struggling with that? Because, surveys show that what suffers is focus on the core business, the ability to innovate. The cloud becomes a detriment rather than a place for cost savings. Why Americaneagle Managed Cloud Services?
I think part of it is that the whole landscape of infrastructure in general now is much more important than it ever was. Before, it was more of a necessary evil for most companies, like 20 years ago, maybe before that. Now it's really a matter of, the technology and the cloud touches virtually every part of the business. So if you walk into a rental car facility or an airline or, a large retail store, you're communicating with a cloud somewhere. So all those systems and everything, if they go down, it's a major issue for the company. So, basically being that we understand those complex systems, it all comes down to people at the end of the day. So one of the problems that we're seeing with a lot of companies is that they have so many of these systems in place, especially medium to large organizations, that as people come and go, they don't always know everything they have. They don't necessarily have it documented well. There's just things that they, that aren't clear. So we become sometimes more knowledgeable or almost the source of truth for a lot of these systems, where when there is a problem, or even if we don't know everything they're doing, we can pinpoint where the problem's at really, really quick. And, provides a really good safety net for the company in terms of just having that extra helping hand or, augmenting their staff, things like that. We never do everything, but companies should really see us as somebody that's like their right arm.
So you guys have kind of taken this journey from infrastructure to code to cloud. And it's a journey not just about technology, it's about experience. Right? Thank you guys. This has been great. And if you'd like to see how your organization can benefit from application-centric cloud management, visit AEMCS.com, where we offer a free cloud and website audit. Now, every audit we've done has led to measurable improvements. So please check it out. Gentlemen, thanks for sharing the AEMCS origin story. This has been Code to Cloud. Thanks for listening.